Welcome back, everyone. I've got Minecraft running in the background and a whole lineup of Reddit stories ready for you today. Let's get started. What's the scariest thing that happened to you? These are mine. My family used to have a dog, and one evening when we were eating dinner, we heard him aggressively bark at something. He was in the living room and we were in the kitchen, so we couldn't see what it was. We assumed it was a cat, although we were a bit skeptical. Our dog was very friendly. He was a Labrador, and they're known for their friendly personalities and are usually excited to meet new people, which is why they rarely get used as guard dogs. The bark sounded strangely aggressive. We had never heard him sound like that before, and we had had him for years at that point. As I said, we assumed it was a cat, but usually when he saw something like that, he just barked loudly and could be heard moving across the floor a little. That evening, he was growling, lowering his pitch, and stayed on edge for the rest of the evening. A few days later, we got news that a man had been walking around the neighborhood acting inappropriately near people's homes, watching them through windows. He was eventually caught and admitted to doing this at multiple homes in the area. When we heard that, it gave us chills because it suddenly hit us that perhaps that same person had been near our home as well. Labradors aren't typically great guard dogs because they're so friendly, but they're still dogs at the end of the day who view their home as their territory. Our dog had always been open to meeting new people, but usually it was with us right there, clearly comfortable with whoever it was. Seeing someone secretly lurking around outside that he had never met before would unsettle even the friendliest dog, especially in the evening. Whenever someone rang our doorbell and one of us wasn't home yet, he would happily walk toward the door, but if everyone was already home, he would grow suspicious and start barking. He had a clear sense of who belonged and who didn't. That's not the only strange thing that happened around that time. Around the same period, 2 women from my village were taking a walk through our nearest forest when a man on a bike passed by completely undressed. They called the police and he was arrested shortly after, as he never rode far and seemed to be waiting for them to catch up to him. Also around that time, a man was involved in a serious incident with a young woman in a nearby town. He was caught, but the police never released much information about him, which led people to speculate about his background and caused some unfounded assumptions to spread. Separately, a man drove a vehicle into a public festival. It initially looked like it might be tied to one narrative, but investigators found that the person responsible held the opposite extremist views and was trying to mislead the public and stir up division. When I was younger, 2 men got out of a mental health facility under concerning circumstances. The police searched for them for days with the help of helicopters. I was in about 5th grade at the time, and I remember feeling scared while out on a walk, especially since helicopters weren't an unusual sight where I lived due to a nearby military base. It was also fall, and I already felt a bit uneasy that time of year because of some unsettling experiences with older kids around Halloween. The men were caught fairly quickly. As far as I know, they had been involved in serious incidents before and were placed in a mental health facility because they were considered unfit to stand trial at the time. After the escape, they were placed in jail instead. Not sure if this is the right place to post this, but here we go. When I was younger, I saw something and no one believed me. I was in year 5 at a pretty small primary school. It was just my class out on the field practicing for sports day. The field had a fence at the far end and behind it was a long line of trees. It was a hot day and one of my friends at the time, let's call her H, was sitting in the shade since it was extremely warm. I joined H after grabbing my drink and needing a moment to sit down. She looked scared and kept staring at the tree line, so I asked her what was wrong, but she wouldn't say. I didn't think much of it at the time since H was a pretty emotional person, so I just sat there and kept her company. The whistle blew and we got up. H ran over to the line while I gathered my stuff and started heading over, but I looked toward the trees and saw something there. I can still remember it clearly to this day. A very tall figure with long black thin hair. I turned away because I thought I was imagining it, but when I looked back it was still there. I ran over to H, clearly scared, and she asked what was wrong. I explained what I saw and she said that was exactly what had scared her earlier. We told our teacher and got sent to the office because they thought someone must have gotten onto the field and was trespassing. But when we explained what it actually looked like, They told us to stop making things up. I'm 18 now and it sounds a bit silly, but I remember all of it clearly. I saw a lot of things growing up that I couldn't explain, but this one terrified me for years. I don't understand how I could have looked away and back again and it still be there, or how anyone could be that tall. I don't know, but if anyone has any ideas about what it could have been, I'd love to hear them. I'm pretty sure something threw my nightstand last night. For some context, my current nightstand is a foldable wooden table because my old one had spiders living in one of the drawers. Last night, or early morning, at about 4 a.m., I was suddenly awoken by a loud crash in my room. It took me a second to fully wake up and realize what had happened. I got up and turned on the lights, only to see that the wooden table I was using as a makeshift nightstand was lying on the floor, and my glass of water had splashed all over the wall a few feet away. I don't move at all in my sleep, and nobody else, including any of my pets, sleeps in my room. The only rational explanation I've been able to come up with is that I was sleepwalking and knocked it over. But that seems unlikely since I was lying on my side facing the wall when I woke up to the noise. I'm about to go back to sleep. I'll update if anything else happens tonight. If you hear something on the 4th floor of the abandoned Plaza Hotel, do not look up. Hey, any of you from New Mexico know about the old Plaza Hotel in Las Vegas? Not the one in Nevada with the Strip, but the tiny historic town about an hour from Santa Fe. It's got a lot of history, but there's an urban legend about the abandoned top floor that local kids always dare each other to check out. I thought it was just a story until last night. For context, the place has been around since the late 1800s. The lower floors are still open and fully functioning, looking vintage and elegant, but the 4th floor has been completely walled off and abandoned for decades due to structural issues. The local legend is that back in the day, a man lost his mind up there and locked himself in his room with his dog. Supposedly, they both starved, and now if you stand outside the hotel at exactly 3:15 a.m., you can hear a dog scratching and barking at the bricked-up windows. My friend Marcus and I were staying there last night. We had been out checking out the local spots, just hanging out, and got back to the hotel pretty late. We were standing in the empty courtyard smoking a cigarette, completely forgetting about the legend, when the air suddenly turned ice cold. I mean freezing, see your own breath cold. Then we heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from right above us. We looked up, and from the dark, abandoned 4th floor, we heard a deep, distorted growl. It didn't sound like a normal dog, though. It sounded heavy, echoey, and completely wrong. Marcus, being himself, pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it straight up at one of the dusty dark windows. The growling instantly stopped. For a second, nothing happened. Then a pale, elongated face slammed against the inside of the glass. It wasn't a dog. It looked more like a person, but its jaw was unhinged, stretching down toward its chest, and its eyes were wide and deep red. It started scratching furiously at the glass from the inside, leaving dark, wet streaks behind. But here's the part that's keeping me awake right now. When Marcus shined the light on it, the thing stopped scratching. It pressed its distorted face against the glass, stared directly down at Marcus, and in a strange imitation of a human voice it shouted, "Turn that light off." We dropped our stuff and sprinted back inside to our room on the 2nd floor. We locked the door and pushed a chair under the handle. It's currently 4 a.m., and for the last 20 minutes I've been hearing the sound of something scratching slowly on the carpet right outside our door, along with a faint, wet, panting sound. If you ever visit New Mexico, do yourself a favor and stay somewhere else. Whatever is trapped on that 4th floor isn't a dog, and I think Marcus made it angry. This is my story. This story takes place when I was 14. I'm 18 now. Me and my family didn't do a lot for the summer before, so my dad wanted to take me out camping with my brothers. My mom was too nervous to come along, and honestly with good reason. Only one of my brothers came with me and my dad that day. He was 9 at the time. We went to a woodland area near my hometown. It wasn't far to drive, but quite far to walk. We brought supplies. I'm from the UK, so we didn't need to worry much beyond bringing a knife, since the wildlife isn't as dangerous as in some other countries. We walked for maybe half an hour before finding a spot to set up our tent, next to a small stream, if you could even call it that. We set it up together, started a fire, and made dinner using pots and bottled water to cook eggs. Once we had eaten, we relaxed for a bit, watching the wildlife as the sun set on the tree line in the distance. We saw the occasional person walk through since there was a trail nearby. Around 8 p.m., in that dark October night, someone else set up camp on the opposite side of the trail. We watched them set up. My dad even offered to help, but the man declined. He looked to be in his mid-40s, maybe 50. We didn't see him as any kind of threat. Once he finished setting up, we spoke briefly between camps. Then we put out our fire and got into our sleeping bags. We slept through most of the night normally until the early hours of the morning, when I woke up to the sound of rustling around our tent. I was confused and thought it was just an animal, so I didn't move, just tried to fall back asleep. But then I heard it, a quiet whistle, like someone blowing air through their lips. I woke up instantly. I looked over slowly, thinking maybe it was my dad, but he was sound asleep. My brother too, eyes shut calmly as he rested. I kept hearing that whistling sound circling the tent. I slowly sat up and grabbed our bag, pulled out the small knife and held it close to me, my knuckles turning white. I kept my breathing steady and listened. I tried to slide back down to lay flat again in case there was a light outside and he could see my silhouette, but I accidentally bumped my brother with my elbow. He coughed in his sleep, and the whistling stopped right behind the tent. I could hear leaves rustling, but not like footsteps, more like someone turning in place. I could tell whoever was outside had heard us. I had no real proof this person meant any harm, but then I heard slow steps moving toward the entrance of the tent. I was terrified. I held the knife ready to defend myself. Then I heard a shout from the man camped across the path, yelling for whoever it was to get out of there. I heard quick footsteps retreating into the distance. I had never felt more relieved in my life. Still holding the knife, I opened the tent door and called out to the older man, thanking him as best I could, stumbling over my words. He just gave me a thumbs up that I could barely see through his flashlight beam. I shut the tent door and went back to sleep, knife still in hand. I woke up faintly once more during the night to some noise, but didn't think much of it, assuming the man had scared off whatever or whoever it was. The next morning, I woke up to my dad and brother already packing up. I felt relieved knowing we had made it through whatever that was the night before. We packed up the tent and left. Before we did, I glanced at the other man's tent one last time, assuming he was still asleep, and we headed home. I didn't return to those woods for about a week. A week or so later, I was walking my dog with my dad in the woods, and when we reached our old campsite, I looked through the trees and saw that the man's tent was still there. We figured maybe he was just staying out there a long time since he had packed quite heavily. My dad wanted to thank him properly after hearing what had happened, so he walked over and tapped on the tent. No response. After a few attempts, he opened it to check inside, and his expression changed instantly. I looked over, confused, as my dad pulled out his phone and called for help without letting go of the tent zipper. I looked inside too, and what I saw made my heart drop. The man had clearly been there for some time, with signs that something violent had happened to him. The police arrived and eventually took care of everything, and we went home. To this day, I carry a lot of guilt about what happened to that man. We had a noticeably larger tent that night, and I've always wondered if whoever was outside our tent that night had been deciding whether to come after all of us. But when the other man called out and revealed he was alone in his tent, that person may have seen him as an easier target instead. Whoever was responsible was never identified, and we haven't been back to those woods since. He was waiting at the door. Hey, this is my first time sharing a story here, and trust me, I have plenty more to tell. This one just happened, and I'm still a little shaken while writing this. For some context, my house is pretty unusual. It has corridors that lead nowhere and a few hidden passages leading up to the attic, so I've never really felt completely safe here, especially at night. I always have this lingering feeling that someone or something is watching me. So it was 2:30 a.m. and I got that feeling again. I was about to leave the house to get some food when I turned off the lights and heard footsteps. There was no one else awake at home. I froze with my hand on the doorknob. Someone was standing on the other side of the door. My house has fairly high walls, but there's a gate that makes it easier than it should be for someone to get in. In fact, someone broke into my house back in early 2021. At the time, our security cameras were working and we caught the intruder on footage. Sadly, the cameras don't work anymore, so I couldn't see who was outside this time. But I knew someone was there. I could make out their silhouette through the windows. Whoever it was seemed to know I usually wake up around this time. Whoever it was seemed to know I was about to leave the house. I can't see the person anymore. I've locked every door and window and I'm sitting here in complete darkness writing this. I don't know if they're still outside. I don't know if it's the same person who broke into my house back in 2021. I hope not. Now this actually happened to me in my house. Now this happened a good few years ago, so it wasn't yesterday, and some of what I'm about to tell you is a little fuzzy. But like the title says, this did actually happen to me, believe it or not. I stay in a house that isn't too old, maybe around 30 years old at most. My family came into a bit of money thanks to a lottery win, so we managed to buy this house when it was a new build, at a great price. We've had a few things happen in this house that I can't really explain, like voices calling my name, shadowy movement, plates flying off a table, and a few more, but those stories will be for another upload. This one night, though, I will never forget. It really did unsettle me quite a bit. I was asleep in bed one night, nothing unusual about that. I woke up to a face of an old man looking down at me. The face was full of wrinkles and had a beard, and it looked very, very angry. I'm pretty sure I let out a scream because it genuinely terrified me. As soon as I screamed, the face vanished into thin air. I was left staring at the ceiling where it had appeared. That night, I couldn't fall back asleep at all. I told a few friends about this, and they thought I was making it up, calling me overly imaginative. But this face did appear. I'm certain of it. Fast forward a few years later, I had friends over and we were having a few drinks. My brother was with us. He started telling a story about something he experienced in the house, and believe it or not, it was the exact same thing that happened to me. Now, I had never told my brother about my experience. He had no idea, only my friends knew. My friend's face went pale and he looked over at me once my brother finished telling his story. Maybe now they finally believed me. Is this a coincidence? Did we both see the same face in the house? The strange part is that we know we're related to a woman from this area who was accused of practicing witchcraft and was killed many years ago. An uncle of mine had traced our family tree and discovered we were descendants of her. She was killed because of those accusations. We've had things happen to us in this very house, in the same village she was from. Can things like this follow a family across generations? Would love to hear everyone's thoughts on this. Thanks for reading. Stay tuned. There will be more uploads soon since plenty more has happened here over the years. My scariest experience. A few years back, I was with my mom in the West Coast at the time. There was a meteor shower, so my mom and I went to the backyard. A few minutes passed by of watching the shower until I heard a stomp. I thought nothing of it as deer and other animals around the area are very common. But a bit later, I heard it again. This time it was louder and closer. But unlike last time, it didn't stop. The stomping got closer and closer. My mom recognized the possible danger. She pushed me into the house. My mom got inside and locked the back door. She had me turn off all of the lights. After I turned them off, we were in the living room. I sat on the couch while my mom sat in her chair. The couch was in front of the window while my mom sat across from me. Then suddenly I heard a low tapping sound. My mom told me she couldn't see what was making the sound, but she told me not to look. After everything calmed down, I went to sleep and I went out looking for anything from last night, but found nothing. I live in a pretty rural area. It's a small town. Most people I told chalked it up to a deer that was territorial, but I think differently. I know something was out there. Whatever it was running to us at full speed. I want to know what y'all think it could have been. So I will preface this with this didn't happen to me, it happened to my son and his 2 friends, but I was involved later. TLDR, my teenage son and his friends were stalked by 2 grown adults with a weapon in the Aussie bush at night. My son wanted to go camping for his 16th birthday with some mates. We're from rural Australia, the high country, the bush, not the outback many others are familiar with for these types of stories. We're also very experienced bush people. My father was a soldier, I was also military, and my son is in cadets, so we know what we're doing and have done this stuff all our lives. Besides, we don't have dangerous animals that will attack or eat us. So we meet his friends, all aged 15 and 16, at the entrance of the Stanley Forest, load up the Uda and head in. We find a spot, I help them unpack, then I leave them to their own devices. This part is told from my son's perspective. So I arrive with my friends, M16 and F15, at our usual spot in the Stanley Forest, and everything is cool. Once Dad drives off with the "don't add to the population, don't subtract from the population, and don't subtract yourself" speech, we set up camp, cook some food, and then go for a bit of a walk around nearby. The creek is raging after a week of constant rain, so it's quite loud, but we can still hear the birds and occasionally see a wallaby. As we're getting the fire started, a couple, 1 male, 1 female, I'd say both in their 30s, come down into our camp in their Jeep. Now there's an unspoken rule about bush camping here. If someone is in the spot, you turn around and keep going. You don't have a chat with them, you don't ask to hang out, you don't set up your camp in the same area. That's just how it goes here in Australia. Our campsite is located on the edge of the day picnic area, so although this is a state forest and hunting is permitted, it is not allowed where we were, and legislation dictates it is prohibited 30 minutes before sunrise and 30 minutes after. So no night hunting is allowed, and to hunt you must follow permit rules. Hunting of native wildlife is strictly prohibited unless you have a specific license and only on private land. Our campsite is visible from the main entry road. It's right next to the creek, and directly behind us is a steep ridge. Me and my mate, I'll call him K, are at the fire which we have set up in front of our tent that faces the ridge, while our female friend, I'll call her M, is fighting with her swag which she has set up about 9-ish feet away from our tent, back against the ridge facing the creek. We did not see this couple's Jeep travel along the main entry road, which means it could only have come from the other side of the ridge somewhere. They get out, and the guy is fully decked out in camo gear and has a very expensive compound bow. They tell us they have a camp further down and we're just checking it out. I was an idiot and know that now, but I told them we were minors, so they should probably leave. I know, but I mean, it was also obvious we weren't full-grown adults by our appearance. Without another word, they get in their vehicle and leave. I thought that was the end of it, but it wouldn't be a worthwhile story to post here if it were. Shoot forward another couple of hours and it's getting dark. The sun is below the mountain line now, but we can still see. The same couple come down from the ridge, no walking track, just bush. Him with his bow and the chick a couple of paces in front of him. She comes straight to K and I whilst the guy heads to M. The chick tells us that he was looking for a wallaby. Red flag, right? Knowing you can't hunt in this part of the forest and nobody can hunt wallabies. It gets weirder though. The bloke says they have a campsite just a bit down further and some drinks. Do we want to come down with them? Hard pass, we're young but not stupid. Besides, that's not our vibe. They leave back up the track, but we don't see them head along the main road. Now comes the build-up. It's dark, we've stupidly burnt all of our wood and the wood around is too wet. So it's dark and we only have a torch for light. We see a flashlight flickering along the ridge, and then it's that same couple in our campsite again. This time though, the chick was through our sight to the very back of it while the guy hovers near M. I'm watching them from the fire and tell the chick that the track at the back of our sight goes right up around the ridge. The bloke snaps at me and says he knows this place very well, with the sound of his voice as though he's smiling. I can see the compound bow in his hand, though with his other hand deep in his pocket. At this point, K walks over to M and confronts the guy as confidently as possible, asking him if he's hunting because earlier they were looking for a wallaby. He must have looked at K in such a creepy way because later, K told me he felt like he was in danger right there. Apparently this bloke said, "No, we're just looking and having some fun." As they leave, they head towards the track again rather than the ridgeline. However, once they get to the main road, they turn right, not along the road but back into the bush, and then what is even more unnerving, turn off their flashlight. That's 3 times now the same couple have breached that unbroken camping rule and have deliberately come into our camp. First trying to lure us with the promise of drinks, then to presumably check out our sleeping arrangements, I can only assume. I decide I really don't like this and make my way as quietly and darkly as possible up the track to see how close their campsite is, knowing full well the next designated campsite is over 2 kilometers away. I mean, we're here nearly every second weekend. I know this area very well myself. Except, there is no campsite, there is no fire despite them telling us they had a big one. There was just their car parked off in the shrubs, no lights, and know them. I head back down and tell my friends this development. Then Em tells us that while she was over at Rswfq when I was up the ridge, she could hear the couple talking. Em said she couldn't make out what was being said, but it was definitely the same voices and they were somewhere behind our camp. We collectively agree something is very wrong here, and I call my old man to let him know what's going on. This next bit is from my perspective as the dad, again. It's about 9 p.m. at night and raining steadily but not deafeningly by now, and my son calls me. The first words out of his mouth before I can even say what's up are, "I think we might be in danger. Come and get us. Please, some guy with a bow and his girlfriend have been stalking us for hours." Well, I'm in my boots and out of the house with my retired Army K9 faster than you can blink. I don't own a gun. I'm not licensed to own a gun, and I don't feel I need one. I have a trained attack dog. I am well trained and was raised to hold my own. Besides, I live in the bush. I call my son back and he says they can see the couple's flashlight behind the campsite a little way and he thinks they're coming back. I tell him everyone needs to make sure their phones are on silent, get into the bush down along the creek and be quiet, stay there and don't make a sound. I will get there and light the entire area up like a Christmas tree with the car lights. Side note. Most of us bush dwellers have the brightest globes you can get, plus 2 main spotties, a floodlight and maybe some extra spotties down lower, so we can avoid hitting wildlife when driving at night. So the drive that would normally take me 40 minutes, I took in 20 and absolutely would have been in a lot of trouble had there been police interception. I'm honestly very lucky I didn't hit a roo or a deer. Anyhow, I'm driving into the forest and only the same campsites along the way are still there. No new additions and nobody walking the tracks that I could see. I get to the track the kids are on and point the car directly at their campsite and light it up. As I get out, I do see just a quick glimpse of a flashlight in my peripheral vision near the ridge. I let my K9 out and tell them it's me. The kids come out from the bush where I told them to hide, and whilst I stand by with the dog doing the perimeter, the kids quickly pack up everything but a tent which we will go back to collect today. Get into the car, and once they're all loaded, I get in, call the dog, and we leave. As we're driving out, my son's friend Em mentions she heard the man saying it's going to be fun the last time the couple walked off, but that she could hear them getting closer right at the edge of the campsite when I was nearly there. The rest of the night thankfully went without a hitch, various makeshift beds put in place in our small farmhouse and a roaring fire for warmth. Look, could it have been a couple of teenagers catastrophizing, just a weird interaction in the bush? Sure, but there's unspoken rules of camping that this couple broke, repeatedly and deliberately. They each had different stories. They were open with carrying their weapon and had no qualms that they were illegally hunting. They also did not have a campsite nor a fire, offered drinks to minors, and when that didn't work kept sneaking back, and the guy was obviously interested in my son's female friend. The experienced bushman in me firmly believes the kids were in danger and that the couple were planning on overpowering or even harming the 2 boys to assault my son's female friend. There really isn't an appropriate explanation otherwise when you hear the story in full. Convoluted but got to the end eventually. Sorry it's so long. Being old enough to know the family secrets meant being told about my grandma's stalkers. I was chatting with my parents tonight and the conversation got dark. I can't remember exactly why. Something to do with my mum making a comment to my dad about his mum's stalkers, so I had to ask. I sort of wish I didn't. When my dad was about 10, so my nan was in her early 30s, she was being harassed. My dad didn't specify what this meant or how serious it was, just that it lasted a while, even after the police got involved. Officers would show up at her house every day and she began to grow quite familiar with them. They'd park their police cars outside and just observe. Felt strange, so I was told. The harassment got worse. Their cat had been taken and harmed and left on the doormat. On a separate occasion, though I'm not sure which came first, a rabbit was found hung outside the front door. Around this time, my Nan stopped seeing the man who had been harassing her. She hadn't seen him for a while, but the police presence became more frequent. One officer in particular would let himself in and out of the house freely. The most disturbing part of the story came when my dad's family left for holiday and returned to find something that can only be described as a scene from a horror movie. A dress of my Nan's, along with some of her personal belongings, had been laid out on her bed, surrounded by photos of the family taken from all around the house, with my granddad's face torn out of every single one. My granddad tried to do something about it. He would follow the car when he saw it leaving their house and once even chased the person out of their home entirely. Unfortunately, I have no real closure on this story. My dad doesn't know why it eventually stopped, only that it did, and that it lasted for years, and that everything he knows is only the surface of what actually happened.